The thunder rolled across the endless Montana sky as Penelope Valens clutched her swollen belly, peering through the cracked window of her isolated cabin. Rain lashed against the weathered wood as she traced the faint trail that wound through the foothills, silently willing her husband's return. It had been 4 months since Thomas rode off with promises to strike it rich in the silver mines. 4 months since he'd abandoned her, with empty cupboards and a growing child beneath her heart. It was 1878, and the promise of the West had proven as harsh as it was beautiful. Penelope had come from Boston 3 years prior, a young bride of 19, full of dreams about frontier life. Now, at 22, those dreams had withered like prairie grass in August heat. The knock at the door startled her so badly she nearly knocked over the oil lamp. Visitors were rare this far out, especially in this weather. "Who's there?" she called, one hand protectively covering her 8-month belly. "Madam, sorry to trouble you. Name's Noah Winters. My horse threw a shoe about 2 miles back. I saw your chimney smoke." Penelope hesitated, then reached for the shotgun Thomas had left behind. She kept it aimed at the door as she unlatched it with her free hand. The man who stood dripping on her porch wasn't what she expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, yes, but his eyes were gentle beneath the brim of his rain-soaked hat. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn leather chaps, simple cotton shirt now plastered to his skin, and a bandana knotted at his throat. "I don't mean to impose, madam," he said, keeping his hands visible. "But if I could just warm up by your fire for a spell before heading on, I'd be obliged." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the sincerity in his face. Penelope lowered the shotgun slightly. "You can come in, Mr. Winters, but I'll keep this close," she said, nodding at the gun. "That's only sensible, madam," he replied with a respectful nod. Noah stepped inside, removing his hat and standing awkwardly by the door to avoid dripping on her floor. His eyes took in the sparse cabin, the neatly swept floor, the carefully mended curtains, the lack of food on the shelves. "You're alone out here?" he asked, concern etching his features as he noticed her condition. "My husband's working the mines near Virginia City. He'll be back any day now," Penelope lied, the words bitter on her tongue. Thomas had promised to return before the baby came, but his last letter, sent weeks ago, spoke more of gambling halls than silver strikes. Noah nodded, though something in his eyes told her he didn't quite believe her. "Madam, if you don't mind my saying, you look like you could use a hot meal yourself. I've got provisions in my saddlebags. Would it be an imposition if I cooked us both some supper?" Penelope's pride warred with hunger. She hadn't eaten properly in days, carefully rationing what little remained. For the baby's sake, she nodded. "That would be appreciated," she admitted. Noah returned moments later with a canvas bag, from which he produced dried beef, beans, coffee, and, to her delight, 3 apples. "Picked these at the last homestead I passed," he explained, setting them on the table. "Nothing better than fresh fruit for a—" He hesitated, then finished. "For a lady in your condition." As Noah worked at her small stove, Penelope studied him. His movements were efficient and practiced, his manner respectful. When he served her a plate of hot beans and beef, the simple food smelled better than any fancy Boston restaurant meal she could remember. "Thank you," she said softly after the first few bites. "I'm Penelope Valens. Pleased to meet you properly, Mrs. Valens." He tipped his head. "I'm riding for the Diamond Bar Ranch, bringing a message to Fort Benton. Should have been there yesterday, but this weather slowed me considerable." "The Diamond Bar? That's Judge Carson's place, isn't it? Near Helena?" Noah nodded. "Been working there nigh on 5 years now. The judge is a fair man." They ate in comfortable silence until a particularly violent contraction made Penelope gasp and drop her fork. Noah was on his feet instantly. "Mrs. Valens, are you all right?" She breathed through the pain, counting silently. "It's nothing. The baby's been restless today." "When are you expecting?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "About a month still," she replied, though privately she feared it might be sooner. The journey from town had been difficult last time, and the midwife had warned her the baby might come early. Noah nodded, but his brow remained furrowed. "If you don't mind my saying, madam, you shouldn't be out here alone in your condition." "I'm not alone," she insisted. "Thomas will be back." "Of course," Noah said, though they both knew it for the fiction it was. Still, might I ask, is there family nearby? Someone who could stay with you? Penelope shook her head. My parents are back east. She swallowed hard. They disowned me when I married Thomas. They thought the West too uncivilized. And your husband's people? Dead. Cholera, when he was young. Noah's expression darkened. Mrs. Valens, I don't mean to overstep, but I could ride into town tomorrow, fetch the doctor or a neighbor lady to stay with you. The nearest neighbor is the Hendersons, 15 miles east, she said, and Doc Simmons rarely leaves town unless it's an emergency. This seems like it could become one mighty quick, Noah observed. Another contraction gripped her, harder this time. She couldn't hide her grimace. That's not a restless baby, Mrs. Valens, Noah said quietly. That's labor starting. No, she protested, fear blooming in her chest. It's too early. But her body betrayed her as warm liquid soaked her skirts. Her water had broken. The color drained from Noah's face, but to his credit, he didn't panic. Mrs. Valens, I've helped birth plenty of calves and even a foal or two, but this is different. What can I do? There's a birthing kit, she managed between breaths. Behind the bed, my mother-in-law's. She was a midwife. Noah fetched the wooden box, setting it on the table. What else? Water, clean cloths, and... She looked at him desperately. I'm scared, Mr. Winters. He knelt beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. You can call me Noah, Mrs. Valens, and I won't leave you, I promise. The hours that followed tested them both. Noah boiled water, prepared the bed, and helped Penelope when the contractions came so fiercely she couldn't stand alone. For a man who'd spent his life in the company of cattle and horses, he showed remarkable gentleness. By midnight, Penelope was lying on her bed, sweat soaking her nightgown, her hair a tangled mess around her face. She caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror across the room and turned away, ashamed. I'm not pretty anymore, she whispered, tears tracking down her flushed cheeks. Look at me. Noah, who was wringing out a cool cloth for her forehead, paused. In the lamplight, his expression softened as he gazed at her. You've never been more beautiful, he whispered back, with such sincerity that fresh tears sprang to her eyes. As dawn broke over the Montana wilderness, Penelope's daughter entered the world with a lusty cry. Noah had proven himself invaluable, following Penelope's pained instructions and the notes in her mother-in-law's journal with steady hands. She's perfect, he said, awe in his voice, as he wrapped the tiny infant in clean linens and placed her in Penelope's arms. Like her mama. Exhausted beyond measure, Penelope could only cradle her daughter and weep with relief. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along. Providence, Mrs. Valens, Noah said, his voice rough with emotion. That's all it was. In the days that followed, Noah remained at the cabin, fetching water, chopping firewood, and hunting fresh game so Penelope could regain her strength. He fashioned a crude cradle from a wooden crate, lining it with the softest blanket from his bedroll. You don't have to stay, Penelope told him on the third day, watching as he repaired her leaking roof. Your message to Fort Benton. Sent word with a passing cavalry patrol yesterday, he replied, hammering a nail into place. The judge will understand once I explain. And what exactly will you explain? She asked, bouncing little Sarah in her arms. Noah climbed down the ladder, wiping sweat from his brow. That I came across a lady and her newborn child who needed assistance. That's all he needs to know for now. For now. The words hung between them, full of unspoken meaning. A week passed, then another. Noah rode to town for supplies, returning with not only food and necessities for the baby, but also a letter from Thomas. Penelope's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Noah busied himself with the horses outside, giving her privacy. When he returned, he found her sitting motionless by the fire, the letter crumpled in her lap. Mrs. Valens, Penelope, he asked gently. He's not coming back, she said, her voice hollow. He's met someone in Virginia City, a saloon singer. He says I should sell the cabin and go back east. Noah's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. What will you do? What can I do? She looked up at him, despair in her eyes. I have no money, no skills that matter out here, and now a child to feed. You have more skills than you know. Noah said firmly. "I've watched you this past fortnight. You're strong, resourceful, and brave as any woman I've ever met." Penelope managed a weak smile. "You're kind to say so." "It's not kindness, it's truth." He hesitated, then continued. "I've been thinking. The Diamond Bar could use a good cook and housekeeper. Judge Carson's wife passed last winter, and the place has gone to shambles. There's a small house by the main ranch, private-like. You and Sarah would be safe there." Hope flickered in her eyes, then dimmed. "I couldn't impose—" "It's not charity," he interrupted. "It's honest work with fair pay, and—" He took a deep breath. "I'd be nearby to help with Sarah, or whatever else you might need." The way he said it made her heart flutter in a way she thought she'd forgotten. "Noah, I'm a married woman." "Not according to that letter," he said quietly. "And I'm not proposing anything improper, Penelope. Just offering a fresh start for you and your daughter." That night, after Sarah was sleeping soundly in her makeshift cradle, Penelope made her decision. She would go to the Diamond Bar, work hard, and rebuild her life, not for Thomas, not even for Noah, but for herself and her daughter. The journey to the Diamond Bar took 3 days. Noah fashioned a sling for Sarah that allowed Penelope to carry her safely while riding. He led her horse, setting a gentle pace, stopping frequently for rest. Judge Carson's ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, the main house a substantial 2-story structure of timber and stone. Half a dozen cowboys stopped their work to stare as Noah led Penelope up the long drive, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and admiration. The judge himself came out to meet them, a tall, silver-haired man with kind eyes and a commanding presence. He listened to Noah's explanation without interruption, then turned to Penelope with a warm smile. "Mrs. Valens, any friend of Noah's is welcome here. The position is yours for as long as you wish it, and I think you'll find the cottage quite comfortable for you and your little one." True to his word, the cottage was perfect, a snug 2-room structure with a small garden plot behind. It sat a respectable distance from the bunkhouse, affording Penelope privacy while keeping her within the ranch's protection. The ranch hands treated her with unfailing courtesy, tipping their hats when she brought meals to the main house, offering to carry water or chop wood for her stove. But it was Noah who stopped by most evenings, sometimes with a wildflower for her table, other times with a toy he'd carved for Sarah. "You're spoiling her," Penelope chided one evening, as Noah bounced the 3-month-old on his knee, making her gurgle with delight. "Can't help myself," he admitted with a grin. "She's got her mama's smile." Penelope felt herself blush. These moments had been happening more frequently, comments that blurred the line between friendship and something deeper, glances that lingered longer than necessary. Fall came to Montana, painting the cottonwoods gold along the creek banks. One crisp October evening, Noah arrived at Penelope's door, looking uncharacteristically nervous, his hat in his hands. "Would you walk with me, Penelope?" he asked. Mrs. Henderson from the main house said she'd watch Sarah. Curious, Penelope agreed. They strolled toward the creek, the setting sun casting long shadows across the pastures. "I received a letter today," Noah said finally, "from the courthouse in Helena." Penelope's heart skipped. "Oh?" "It's about your divorce petition. It's been granted." 3 weeks earlier, after discovering that Thomas had actually married the saloon singer in a drunken ceremony that constituted bigamy, Penelope had filed for divorce on grounds of abandonment and adultery. Noah had accompanied her to Helena, standing beside her as she spoke to the judge. "So I'm truly free," she whispered, stopping to watch the sunset paint the mountains crimson. "You are," Noah confirmed. He hesitated, then reached for her hand. "Penelope, I've waited to speak until this was settled. I wouldn't disrespect you by saying things that couldn't be honorably followed through." She turned to him, her heart pounding. "What things, Noah?" "That I love you," he said simply. "That watching you these past months, your courage, your kindness, the way you love that little girl has made me certain I want to spend my life with you, if you'll have me." Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes. "Noah? I know it might be too soon," he rushed on, "and I'll wait as long as you need. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, I'm here. Sarah, too. I already love her like she was my own." Penelope stepped closer, resting her hand on his chest. "It's not too soon," she whispered. I think I've known since that night Sarah was born, when you looked at me truly, looked at me and didn't see a mess or a burden, but something beautiful. Because you are beautiful, Penelope Valens, inside and out. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home, a home she'd never known she was searching for until that moment. They married at Christmas, in the ranch's main house decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. Judge Carson officiated, while Sarah, now nearly 6 months old, was held by Mrs. Henderson, who'd become like a grandmother to the child. The Diamond Bar hands stood as witnesses, cleaned up in their Sunday best, expressions ranging from misty-eyed sentimentality to good-natured envy. Noah had earned their respect long before, but his devotion to Penelope and Sarah had elevated that respect to something approaching reverence. Never seen a man so determined to do right by a woman and child, Judge Carson commented during the celebration that followed. Noah rode through that blizzard last month to fetch the doctor when Sarah had croup, nearly froze himself solid, but wouldn't hear of anyone else going. He's a good man, Penelope agreed, watching as her new husband twirled a giggling ranch wife around the makeshift dance floor. More than that, the judge said, he's a man who knows the value of what he's found. Some men search their whole lives and never figure that out. Spring brought new beginnings in more ways than one. Judge Carson, impressed with Noah's management skills and integrity, promoted him to foreman. The position came with a substantial raise and a larger house, a proper ranch house with 3 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a wide porch that faced the mountains. Room to grow, Noah commented with a hopeful smile as they moved their belongings. Penelope returned his smile, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. We might need it sooner than you think. The joy that spread across his face was something she would treasure forever. That night, as they lay in their new bed, Noah's hand protectively covering her abdomen, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought them together. I was so afraid when Thomas left, she admitted in the darkness. Not just of being alone, but that no one would ever look at me with love again. When I was pregnant with Sarah, I felt so ungainly, unwanted. Noah propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious in the moonlight streaming through their window. Penelope Winters, the day I saw you standing in that cabin doorway, shotgun in your hands, determination in your eyes despite everything, that was the day I started falling in love with you. Even though I was enormous with another man's child, she asked. Especially because of that, he said firmly. Your strength, your fierce protection of Sarah, even before she was born, how could I not admire that? How could I not find it beautiful? Tears welled in her eyes. I'm afraid I'll never understand what I did to deserve you, Noah Winters. You existed, he said simply. That's enough for me. Their son, Benjamin, was born the following autumn, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined chin. Noah was the one who placed him in Sarah's eager arms, carefully showing his 15-month-old daughter how to support her brother's head. You're a big sister now, he explained gently. That's an important job. Sarah looked solemnly from the baby to Noah. Papa help? She asked in her small voice. Noah's eyes met Penelope's over their children's heads. It was the first time Sarah had called him Papa. Yes, sweetheart, he answered, his voice rough with emotion. Papa will help, always. The years that followed brought challenges, as years always do. There were hard winters when the snow piled high around the ranch house, summers of drought when the creek ran dry and the cattle grew thin. There was a terrible spring when scarlet fever swept through the county, taking 3 ranch hands and nearly claiming Sarah before Noah rode through a raging thunderstorm to bring medicine from Fort Benton. But there were joys too, countless joys that outweighed the hardships. The birth of their daughter Emma, 2 years after Benjamin. Sarah's first day of school in the one-room schoolhouse the community had built. The Christmas Eve when Noah presented Penelope with a piano he'd secretly ordered from St. Louis, remembering how she'd once mentioned missing the music of her Boston childhood. There was the spring day when Judge Carson, aging and ready to retire, called them to the main house and offered them the chance to buy the Diamond Bar at a price they could actually manage. You two have put your hearts into this land, the old man said. There's no one else I'd rather see carry it forward. By their 10th anniversary, the Diamond Bar under Noah and Penelope's stewardship had become one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. They had added a proper kitchen to the main house, expanded the bunkhouse for their growing staff, and built a new barn that was the envy of neighboring ranches. But more importantly, they'd built a family, one bound not just by blood, but by choice and love. On a warm evening in June 1888, Penelope stood on their porch watching Sarah, now 10 years old, teaching 7-year-old Benjamin and 5-year-old Emma how to catch fireflies in glass jars. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, where their 4th child was making his or her presence known with enthusiastic kicks. Noah joined her, slipping his arm around her waist, his hand covering hers on her stomach. "Happy?" he asked, dropping a kiss on her temple. Penelope leaned into him, savoring his warmth and the sense of security he'd brought to her life. "Completely," she answered, "though I fear I'm becoming quite the spectacle again." She gestured ruefully at her advanced pregnancy. Noah turned her to face him, his eyes traveling over her with the same admiration they'd held that night in her cabin a decade ago. "Penelope Winters," he said, his voice low and sincere, "when will you believe me? You've never been more beautiful than you are right now." And as the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of gold and crimson, as their children's laughter echoed across the ranch yard, Penelope finally did believe him. The uncertain young woman from Boston was long gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and deeply loved. In the western wilderness that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving, she had found not just survival, but belonging. Not just a house, but a home. Not just a man, but a partner who saw her true worth when she couldn't see it herself. And that, Penelope thought, as Noah's lips found hers in the gathering twilight, was the greatest fortune any woman could hope to find, east or west.